Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Generally Irritable. I first want to start out by saying thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. That's betterhelp.com for helping sponsor this episode. We're going to hear about our sponsor a little later in the episode. So as you're coming on, getting ready to watch, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And share my social media with all your friends and family. We tackle really tough conversations here every week. We have on a guest to talk about some topic that is important to you, to my viewers, to me, to Vermonters, to Americans. And so if we want to make sure that we're having good discourse and spreading the message of conservatism or conservative values, of life, constitution, the more we can share that, the more we can share these good conversations with other Vermonters, with our friends and family, I think the better off we will be. I really think that the current media apparatus does not do a great job of covering topics like Prop 5. So we often see that our media has a bias. They have a way that they would like to see things go. They have a preference for the bill that they want, for the candidate that they want. And we can tell this in the way that they highlight and how much time they spend on any given topic. So I'm not hearing about Prop 5 a ton in mainstream media, if you will, in Vermont. I feel like I kind of wonder if they think that it's a settled deal. Now, I hear it from candidates running for office, but why do we not hear from the opponents as much as we do from the proponents? So tonight on the show, we've got Matthew Strong with Vermonters for Good Government and Representative Ann Donahue here in Vermont from Washington, Vermont, talking about Proposition 5 and kind of breaking down what problems that they believe, that we believe, that lawyers believe, that representatives believe are going to come up if somehow this verbiage ends up in our Constitution. So for those of our viewers who don't know, Prop 5 started out as Article 22, and then it was like HR 47 or something. Matthew and Ann can correct me if I'm wrong. So it started out as a bill, worked its way through. It's now going to be on the ballot in November, and it says that we're going to add reproductive autonomy to our Constitution. And the people who wrote the bill literally said that it was done vaguely on purpose so that it will be worked out in the courts. And I find that deeply troubling. You've got pro-life people against it, and even pro-choice people are against it. And so if both sides of this issue actually say that this constitutional amendment is a problem, we probably should look at that and take a listen. So before we go any further, let me introduce my guests, Matthew and Ann. Thank you both for coming on the show tonight and sharing your knowledge and information about Prop 5 with our viewers.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful to be here. Great to be back, Erica. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So did I get it right? Was it HR 47 when it started out?
Unfortunately, that was entirely wrong, and that's okay.
Wait, that's the education bill.
No, it's actually all connected.
Okay.
H 47 passed in 2019, and around that same time, Prop 5 began the process of a constitutional amendment, which in Vermont you have to pass both House and Senate twice on either side of an election, and then if it passes all four of those votes in the legislative process, then it goes to the ballot in a general election. So we have now passed all four legislative votes, and it is now down to the ballot in November.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it all started. So this actually started 3 years ago. This has been a long process that we're going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And okay. Actually, Ann can speak a little bit more to that because she was in the legislature and dealing with that.
That's what I
Well,
was just thinking. Now, Anne, which committee did this start in? Do you remember?
yeah, it was in the Human Services Committee. I'm in
Okay.
healthcare, so it wasn't my
Okay.
committee. But I think one of
Yep.
the interesting points is that this was all in the middle of COVID. Committees weren't meeting in person.
Okay.
Most of the processes were not in person. So it was, if you want to slip something through that's not well worded and not well thought out and maybe very one-sided, that's certainly the time to do it.
That I feel like there was a lot of that going on during the last couple of years in the state house. You know, when I was at a kind of a wrap up meeting with the Rutland County GOP a couple of months ago, and they were saying, you know, our transportation budget is underfunded by $40 million next year and $60 million the year after that. And then I'm going, wait a second, didn't we get a bajillion dollars from the federal government to plug all our budget shortfalls? How is it that we still don't have money for our budget? What are they doing in Montpelier right now? So, but I digress. I won't ask you to talk too much smack about about your cohorts. But so it started out in human services, and now what was I'm trying to figure out what the impetus was for this going into the Constitution. In a state like Vermont, where we've already got abortion up until the point of birth, where an unborn child is not a person, according to Vermont law, who was it that said, you know what, we need to put something in the Constitution that's super vague that we can get our judges to decipher for people?
Well, I think it was a lot of people who are strong pro-choice advocates, sort of to the extreme end, beyond what most Vermonters believe or think, who ironically wanted it in the Constitution in theory to protect it. You hear some very misleading information right now that putting it in our Constitution will protect it from, look at what's going on in Washington. Congress might take it away. We have to protect it. And of course, that's all pretty silly because we have something called the Supremacy Clause. And whether people like it or not, we can put anything we want in our state constitution. And if the federal government passes a law, that trumps it. So it really does nothing to protect. And there's actually handouts going out to members of the public saying, we have to do this to protect against what might happen in Washington. You know, let's get everybody afraid. But in fact, Washington trumps anything we do in Vermont, including our state constitution. And that's a simple fact. I mean, that's not a debate item. That's a simple fact of law.
Well, there's been so much coming out of Washington and Montpelier lately, you know, particularly some of my opponents on the Democrat ticket this year. They say things that I go, oh, that's not how that works. That's not legal. That's not the process. How can you say stuff like that? I'm going to ask you to speculate, and you absolutely can just choose not to answer. But I go, are they genuinely ignorant to the process of how laws and bills are made, about about federalism? Are they actually ignorant, or are they lying to people?
I think it's somewhere between. I think when you're so focused on a persistent goal that probably people wouldn't support if they really knew what it was about, you're going to really push your points and not really pay attention to what's accurate or not. So that's not quite deliberately lying. It's just not bothering with what the facts are just to sell your point.
Well, you know what I got told a long time ago? Lying by omission, or excuse me, withholding information is still lying. You know, it's just called lying by omission. I'm just not going to give you the facts that you would need to make an informed decision so that you don't know.
Right.
And I think personally, that's one of the things that is the most troubling to me, is that it's this sort of nebulous idea, reproductive autonomy. Now, Matthew, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's one of the great ironies is the the big momentum is about, look at what the Supreme Court did. Look at what they did to us. So let's turn it over to our court and they'll protect us. Our court changes too. Our courts make up changes. And if we turn all the decisions in the future of anything or anything and everything to do with reproductive autonomy, which nobody's clear on what that means or how broad it might be, that's going to be a court in the future that decides it.
Well, and I go, wait a second, since when? Okay, we don't live in an oligarchy, and that's for anybody who doesn't know. And I know, right? Well, we're not supposed to be living in an oligarchy. For those who don't know, an oligarchy is when you're ruled by judges. You get a panel of 9 people or 5 people or whatever it is, and they decide for everyone instead of having a representative republic. And I find that deeply, deeply troubling. So, Matthew, say a little bit about, because I've been hearing mixed signals. Like I said, we're hearing from pro-choice people that this is a bad bill too. So what are, if we just take let's just take abortion off the table. Let's just say, for the sake of this first part of our argument, we take abortion off the table. We're talking about reproductive autonomy in every other sense of the imagination. What are you hearing from folks, from legal scholars and people like that they're concerned about, that this is opening up the door to?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I have come to really enjoy talking with one of our board members. His name is Norm Smith, and he's a practicing attorney here in Vermont. He saw this coming several years ago, which is why he wanted to get the ball rolling and help start Vermonters for Good Government. Because he saw, as a lawyer who has argued in front of the Vermont Supreme Court several times and has actually served on the Vermont Supreme Court, there's a committee, like an advisory committee that he serves on, and I forget what the name of it is, and I apologize, Norm, that I forgot what the name of that committee is. But he is someone who is intimately familiar with Vermont law, the Vermont Supreme Court, and the legislative process and our trends over time as well. And this is something that he's absolutely, as a practicing attorney in Vermont, this is a Pandora's box, and it hinges around slight wording choices that matter big time in the real world. And one of the ones that Ann Donahue mentioned to me, which I hadn't thought of because that's not my expertise, is when they use the word individual instead of literally any other word. That word alone opens up a Pandora's box. And
why is that?
Tell you exactly why.
Okay.
Well, it gets into the weeds in terms of the Constitution, but back when we decided that we shouldn't use man anymore, that we should use person or people instead. And there's a simple piece of the Constitution that says we're making this change, but we don't mean to change any meaning at all except the sex. We're only changing.
We're trying to make it gender neutral.
No substance change.
It doesn't change the meaning of it. It doesn't change the way that this word relates to the laws that have already been written with it. Right. Whatever. Okay,
so in replacing that for man, then one assumes and interprets that a person would mean an adult person. They chose not to use people or person. They chose to use individual. That takes it totally outside of that precedent that says it means the same as what we just changed it to make it gender neutral.
Interesting.
And so you can't say, well, we know that it meant adult. To the contrary, it's an explicit choice to use a different word, which is interpreted by a court to mean deliberative. And by using a different word, you are saying we don't mean just adults. Every individual.
And individual, because it's not differentiating. That is fascinating.
So it's male, female, it's minor, it's adult,
child,
and all of their rights are equal. And so if for some reason they come into conflict, the court has to decide. The court decides. If a man's reproductive autonomy rights are being damaged, interfered with by a woman's reproductive autonomy choice.
Well, then who's trumps whose? Are you going to now
A court has
identify
to-
one gender as being more important or more deserving of representation?
Ask the Supreme Court, because that's where the case will have to go. We don't know. We're voting on an amendment without knowing what that interpretation could end up being.
Well, and I just have to say, I don't want to derail our conversation too much, but every Vermonter, I just want to make sure you guys are all listening to me right now. Be very afraid of this, okay? For those of you who know me, you know that we've been in court with the city of Burlington for 2 years. It's a long story, but they're trying to make us turn the house into a duplex from a triplex. It's absolutely stupid. They used an illegal ordinance written by the city of Burlington to try to enforce it, right? It's illegal because it was never approved by the state legislature. Zoning rules have to be approved by the state legislature. It was never approved, therefore illegal. Therefore, you cannot say that because it was vacant for more than 60 days, it no longer exists. We went all the way to the Supreme Court.
I thought you had a housing shortage.
We
in Tiffin
do.
County.
Oh, and girl, I told you not to get, this is how stupid it is. The Supreme Court literally said in their decision, and I'm not kidding, I'm not being hyperbolic, everyone can go read it. It's probably like Reddick versus the city of Burlington or something. Literally, their Supreme Court decision said, yes, they acknowledged that it was an illegal ordinance from the city of Burlington. And they said, but that's okay because it probably would have passed anyway. And so we're just going to allow it. So the Supreme Court legislated from the bench saying, yeah, this is definitely illegal, but it's okay. And then 2 other election rulings. Alex Stith in Ward 7, he lost by like 4 votes. There was a recount. They threw away a bunch of ballots and sealed some stuff. It was a whole thing. The Supreme Court again ruled against him, even though Burlington broke its own election laws. Ben Luna sued the city over the charter changes from a couple of years ago about the way they did it. He also went all the way to the Supreme Court. And again, the Supreme Court said, yes, the city of Burlington did break its own election laws, but who cares? It's fine. And so when our Supreme Court is so obviously corrupted and in the pocket of doing whatever the executive branch, in theory, it wants it to do, right? Whatever the other elected branches, hey, we can't get this passed through the legislature, so can you just approve it in the court? We need to absolutely defeat Prop 5 be on the ballot. We absolutely have to, because if we have to try to defeat it in the court, I am deeply concerned about what this is going to mean for Vermonters.
Well, I'll tell you what terrifies me the most is that people are being asked to take a vote on something that they are getting misinformation or partial information about. I believe absolutely that if Vermonters knew that this amendment protected abortion beyond the point of viability all the way 9 months until birth, they would absolutely reject it. And I think it's funny. I was asked the other day, well, didn't you know, isn't this going to pass for sure? Didn't you know that in all of the polling, 70% of Vermonters support abortion in most or all cases? And I said, oh, thank you. Could you repeat that for me?
That 70%. Is not true.
Well, let me finish. 70% support abortion in most or all cases. And I said, what did you say again? What were those words? Most or all. Most or all. Most. Can you divide between the most and all? Because only 10% of Americans think all 9 months.
Yes.
And I can bet that 70% of Vermonters do not think it's okay to abort a viable baby, a 9-month pregnancy.
What I've heard is that
such indication. And when they say most or all, it's the most folks who would vote no if they know, if the information gets to them, that you are saying it's a fundamental value of Vermonters to not allow the state to regulate abortion in the 8th or 9th month of a pregnancy.
Well, and my understanding is it's 68% of Vermonters don't want restrictions in the first trimester, which is a very different conversation than abortion up until the point of birth. Those are not the same thing. That's right. Now, you can be pro-life and pro-choice and recognize that a 9-month-old baby is a baby. Okay. If it's, and to me, the viability as the, dividing line, well, guess what? When the baby comes out of my womb at 9 months, it's still not viable. It needs to be fed. It needs to be clothed and sheltered. So what does that even mean anymore?
But see, that's part of the misinformation is so many people are being told we have to pass this to protect Roe v. Wade because Roe v. Wade has been thrown out. And Roe v. Wade does not remotely allow third trimester abortions. To the contrary, they explicitly said that there is an interest of the state in a baby that's reached viability, survivability outside the womb. And I think Vermonters do want to protect Roe v. Wade. They don't realize that that's not what this is doing, that it's going way beyond what they would want to see.
So, Matthew, you were talking about the attorney that's got some interesting, who's sharing some information going on.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is what is the scariest thing that you've heard considered? Let's not even say scary. Let's just go, what is the feared outcome of this that is the most common among people concerned about it, right? It doesn't even have to be the craziest thing that could happen. What is just the most obvious thing that people are worried about?
Well, I think that the most obvious thing is the late term abortion issue, but that's the most obvious. What's not obvious is all of the other stuff, which now goes into play that we don't know what it means, because as Ann mentioned, this is going to actually be this amendment is going to actually be played out in the courts. We don't even know what it actually means in the real world until courts decide on it, and that process could take years. Our court system is way behind. It is overloaded. It is understaffed. It is underfunded.
Yes,
and it is slow. And we're talking about, when we're talking about a pregnancy, we're talking about 9 months. And if we have a situation where, for example, let's say a woman decides that she does not want to keep a baby, a husband or now an ex they're at odds.
Boyfriend.
He said, I want to have a baby, and this is now my constitutionally protected right to reproductive autonomy. And so the woman says no, they have to go to court. So even if you are a standard extreme person, you think whatever that pops into your mind when you think a far left, activist, feminist, whatever person that comes to your mind, if you want to protect abortion and you have to now hire a lawyer, get the court system involved, go before a judge, wait for a judgment to have an abortion, then you should not be voting for Prop 5 either, for Article 22. So, and now that's just for starters, okay?
Right.
Go ahead.
Let's put this in a framework for people. So right now, as it exists, basically, it is up to the woman and the man who is the other half, the other parent of that unborn baby, has no rights essentially at this time.
Correct. And that actually goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. H47 is directly tied into this because in 2019, when it passed, it specifically says woman includes the word abortion and pregnancy. Article 22 includes none of those words.
Oh, wow.
And that's and so it would actually be in many ways a step backwards. And actually the Attorney General's office said, and they agreed with the ACLU, and this is the exact phrase that they used.
Okay, so hold on. So TJ Donovan and the ACLU,
his office,
who are both very liberal and left. Okay, go ahead.
So we actually our other spokeswoman, Anissa Lamberton, wrote a commentary that included this quote, basically saying, if the goal is to protect abortion rights, this language needs to be specific. And the Attorney General's office, the Solicitor General, and the ACLU agreed that needed to happen in order to actually do what they're intending to do, and they ignored that advice.
Oh, wow. Okay. So even the people who would be on the team of yes, we think abortion is great and we're going to go for it, whatever, it's up to the point of birth, whatever. Those folks also were saying, hey, we know you guys are trying to get cute with this language, but if you're actually trying to protect women's right to choose and abortion, it needs to specifically read that in the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, okay. So that's a good spot to put a pin here. We're going to take just a quick break to hear from our sponsor. And for those of you who are watching, again, make sure just like, share, and subscribe. Like the page if you're on Facebook, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and share the information around. The more we can spread the word about this, again, we absolutely need to defeat Prop 5 at the ballot. Whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, you want this proposition to fail. We do not want it to go to the courts. So put your questions in the chat. Send us any information or anything you want to hear from Matthew or Ann. And we'll be back in just a minute. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I don't know about you, but I've definitely struggled with some emotional stuff the last couple of years. I need someone to talk to that's not just my husband or friends or family. I need somebody who's experienced and licensed and trained to listen and help me work through the fear and the anger and the frustration that I've been feeling over the last couple years with these lockdowns. So you too can go to BetterHelp and schedule an appointment with one of their 20,000 licensed therapists. So you go on, you fill out a questionnaire. Within 48 hours, they've paired you with someone who has experience in the field that you specifically are wanting help with. Then you schedule secure video and phone sessions, plus unlimited messaging. And all of this is secure and confidential. Join the over 2 million people who have already taken charge of their mental health. We've got a special offer for our viewers. 10% off your first month of services when you use the special code Generally Irritable. So you want to go to betterhelp.com, that's betterhelp.com/generally irritable, and start saving today. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this episode. Okay, Matthew. So we know Prop 5 is crazy. Well, let me back up. So
yeah, let me jump back into your original question about other issues.
Yes.
So from the standpoint of the real question that Vermonters have to ask, and we have to be telling them, is what does personal reproductive autonomy mean in the real world? What is that going to actually mean? And as Ann mentioned, by using the word individual, not using woman or any other or adult, anything. Yeah. What does that mean for prosecuting crimes against minors? How is that going to work? That's something that needs to be addressed. Was not addressed. Is human cloning now on the table in Vermont?
Oh God.
Is medical experimentation on the table for babies in utero?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and that's going to be the thing, right? So a lot of times what we end up seeing is, people may not let me back up. There's probably a lot of people, I bet, Matthew, when you say things like, is cloning now on the table? Is this now on the table? I'm guessing that people go, oh, come on, that's crazy. Why would you say some stuff like that? Until you know that they actually are doing cloning. They are making chimeras where they're splicing human and animal DNA together. They are trying to grow organs in other they do all this nonsense oftentimes in other countries because it's illegal here in the United States, but it doesn't seem unreasonable to me to think that this could actually be a thing.
Yeah. And not only that, and this is something that Ann has phrased, and I use it all the time now. It's like, this is a sky's the limit, anything goes constitutional amendment.
Mm.
One of the things that hasn't come up yet as well, some of us have tried more than once to introduce a statute, a law in Vermont giving conscience protection to healthcare workers. We're one of only 2 states that does not have that. After this passes, if you are a nurse and you're being told your shift has to cover this abortion on an 8-month pregnant woman, and you say, I can't morally participate in that. It's like, well, it's that or you lose your job.
Too bad. So sad.
We're desperately short of healthcare workers in Vermont. And even if it's only a small number who say, I'm not going to stay in Vermont, we're going to hurt even more.
Okay, so 2 questions. Do you know what the other state is that doesn't have conscious protections? Just curious.
Off the top of my head, I don't. That's a good question. I need to check that.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say we might be able to Google that. Number 2, didn't this happen recently at the UVM Medical Center? Within the last few years, there was a nurse who basically was duped into helping with an abortion.
Yes.
Do we know I heard she was going to sue. I don't remember hearing what happened with that case.
So it got a little complicated. UVM denied that she had been forced to do something against her conscience. And the U.S. Department of Justice brought the case forward and said, yes, we find enough evidence, and started listing out requirements. We had a change of administration on the federal level, and they are not pursuing the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and it the UVM was fighting it tooth and nail, even though they were clearly in the wrong. The Department of Justice said this is a clear violation. It is a clear violation, and had this gone and been a judgment, UVM would have lost every dollar of federal funding.
Wow. So if Christina Nolan were still the U.S. attorney, it would have been prosecuted, basically. I'm speculating.
Right. Yeah. No. As soon as the Biden administration entered office, the Biden administration directed the Department of Justice to drop the case.
Right. And wow. Okay. That just goes to show you how much they don't actually care about your rights or your freedom. And I think the thing that we talk about all the time, or I'll say for myself as a conservative, is if the government is big enough to force you to do things against your will and against your conscience, it's big enough to make you do whatever it wants. And no matter, again, this is another one of those circumstances where no matter where you stand on this issue, you should be very uncomfortable and upset with the way it's being handled.
Well, like it or not, Roe v. Wade was an attempt at balancing between some difficult issues. These are issues that have plagued, our society, not just for decades, but for centuries. Centuries, the tension between the developing life and the woman's autonomy. This has plagued us for centuries. And yet now we have a proposal that says, forget that difficult tension. We're just going to go 100% to one side. We're not going to pay attention to anything else. And what they're doing, what that does is it is making Vermonters perceive, incorrectly, but perceive that in order to protect any rights against what Washington might be doing, in order to protect any rights, you've got to go ahead and vote for this, even though it goes way beyond anything that you would ever support. It's your only way to protect it. And in fact, it does nothing to protect against.
And isn't that government? Well, and that is just more evidence that the government is too big and is a problem. I mean, if we're gonna just do a bunch of random stuff because the government's too big and scary. Like, no, the response to that is to then make the government smaller and have less control over your life. Like, if I'm a person who is pro-choice up until the point of birth, okay, if I just say, you know what, until it comes out of my womb, I can do whatever it's my property, right? We treat the unborn as if they're property. not as if they're human beings. I would think that you would become way more libertarian than authoritarian. I would think you would want less government control, less government regulation, less government telling you what to do than trying to make it bigger and more powerful and have more say over your life.
And actually, this is a very fantastic point that I would love Ann Donahue to address. From a libertarian standpoint, the idea that this sounds like a libertarian constitutional amendment. This is actually a danger because it could create an encroachment by the state on medical facilities who do not provide and do not want to provide abortions.
Yeah, I think it's really fairly not well known. We think of it correctly. Think of our federal constitution as being rights that are as against the government. In other words, your neighbor can't stop you from saying things, but your government can say, well, you've gone too far with this, and we're balancing your right to free speech. But the question is what the government can or can't do in violation of your rights. That's not true with state constitutions. Actually, there's nothing that stops a state, and some states have applied constitutional protections to actions by private actors. Not just against the government, but against private actors. So in other words, a hospital could be told, you are violating this person's right to access abortion.
What? No way.
Yes. Why?
Wait, okay, hold on. Okay, so this is one of the things that I've heard where I go, nah, dude, nah. Because I mean, that would be like, as an example, I have a bookkeeping practice. I don't do taxes. So, I mean, obviously this is not the same conversation, but Vermonters have a right to, I don't know, tax help, but I'm not a tax accountant. So how could you force me to do taxes if I'm a bookkeeper? If I'm a general ledger accountant, how can you force me to be a tax accountant? I don't do that. It's not what I do. You're going to make me learn a new skill. Basically, I have to go back to college to get a master's degree so that I can do this other thing. You know what I mean? Like,
well, not
so
that
argument doesn't.
We're going to make you.
Sense.
We're going to make you do your existing skill for anybody who wants it. We're going to make you. We're going to make it be available. You cannot interfere with an individual's right to access to reproductive services. So as long as you're doing surgery, you can't exclude a type of surgery that you don't want to do if it's violating access.
But that doesn't make any sense because you would be forcing somebody to do something outside. I'm like, if I'm a heart surgeon, you can't make me do brain surgery.
No, but the hospital is a generalist, and the hospital can be told your choice to not offer this service is unconstitutional.
So basically, a hospital could be told you're either going to provide abortion services, even though you don't have staff or a facility to do it.
You need to bring them in. You need to get the staff.
Okay, well, explain to me.
You're going to lose your license.
So what is an example of another constitutional right that the government has forced generalists to provide where they might not have otherwise?
Yeah, I'm not sure generalist is quite the word, but the cases that have come up, have involved free speech because it's another case of fundamental speech.
Okay.
Where the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that has to do with federal government. You cannot tell a person that they can't picket in front of the State House. You can't tell a person that they're barred from public speech. But I, as a private individual, can say, you can't come on my lawn and use your free speech.
Right.
So in one case, a homeowners association had an agreement among all the homeowners. We don't want a bunch of lawn signs on our lawn. So we all sign up and we all agree in our contract that we're not going to allow signs on our lawn.
Yeah.
And one of the people who signed that agreement said, well, my free speech says I should be able to have a sign on my lawn, even though I'm a part of this association. And that state Supreme Court said, no, we're applying the constitutional right to free speech to this private organization. And we're saying it must allow that sign to be on your lawn. So that's the concept that says we can apply our Constitution to private organizations and say, you can't interfere with the fundamental right of this individual.
That is outrageous. That is outrageous.
Yep.
But if you look at that, you can understand how a court could say, we're applying this fundamental right in Vermont to private organizations, for instance, a hospital, and saying you can't do something that's creating a barrier to this constitutional right.
That is fascinating. Well, and because we know we have an activist Supreme Court here in Vermont, I mean, I'd be nervous about anything happening because you don't know what they're going to vote on. You don't know what they're going to go along with. So, and you also don't know what cases are going to be brought before the court first. So it could be one of those kind of circumstances. It might not be the man suing the woman to be able to keep his baby alive or their baby alive. Wow. Okay.
It's probably more likely Planned Parenthood suing, saying this hospital has to offer services because it's in a remote area where women can't access it. So their rights are being interfered with.
Which is now a constitutionally protected right.
Wow.
The same as free speech.
Okay, well, and see, this is one of the things that I get really frustrated about. You know, we said a little bit earlier, people don't understand the process. They don't understand our government. A right, a capital R right, is something that you get just for being born a human being. It's not something that is provided to you by another human being. If you have to take from someone else or depend on someone else for that thing, it's no longer a right, it's a privilege or a benefit. It's not a right, right? My right to life comes from just being born a human. My right to liberty is from just being born a human. So I guess the idea is that if I am born a human being, I can do whatever I want with my body, no matter what, at all times.
Well, right. And I actually support that concept as a concept.
Right.
The problem is, as I'm sure you've heard it before, my dad taught us when we were kids, your right to swing your arm ends just short of my nose.
Yep.
Of course you have a right to personal autonomy. Of course you have a right to control over your body and where you swing your arm, but not if it's punching another nose. And when you have, a viable baby, an 8 or 9 month pregnancy, to say that that's not affecting another set of rights, just goes beyond imagination.
Well, and I think that's why so much of the rhetoric we hear is stuff like clump of cells, right? Because if we can convince people that it's just a clump of cells, then it doesn't deserve, the same protections. Oh, it's not really a thing yet. I just went to Aspire Women's Health on, was it Thursday last week? It was Thursday last week. I went and got a tour. Very cool. And they gave me this little baby. I wish I could hold it up to the camera. It'll get blurry. But this is a 12-week little baby. And I'm like, that is a human. It has a little face. It has little hands and feet. Like, that is not a clump of cells. Okay.
Erica, you have to stop and think for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. When do we call it a baby and when do we call it a fetus or an embryo? How many TV ads have you heard about drugs and they say, don't take this if you're pregnant, it might hurt your unborn baby.
Right.
They don't say your fetus.
No.
Because they are speaking to people who want the baby. We are distinguishing purely based on wanted or unwanted. I can't imagine something scarier than deciding human reality, deciding whether you are a person or not, based purely on, are you wanted or are you not
Oh my
wanted?
God. Oh my
That
God.
defines you. When have we done that in the past, Erica? We've defined other people as not
literally
fully human because
their
we
property.
didn't want them and they were
Exactly.
property.
And so you change the language, right? So whether African Americans or Black slaves, African slaves, any of the slaves that we had, they were not people. They were not human beings. They were property. Just like we talk about the unborn as if they are the property of the woman rather than unique individual human beings.
And the same as we defined people in our time of eugenics, not very many decades ago, as not being legitimately entitled to procreate because we didn't want more of their kind.
Isn't that outrageous? The dehumanization of human beings, that's terrible English, but you get my point. It's just that's what we have to do to justify violence and harm against people, right? So whether it was Jews in Europe back before World War II and everything, they weren't people, they were rats, they were roaches, they started calling them all kinds of names and not human beings.
So we call the exact same thing. We share pictures on the internet now of my baby in utero. We share our son. That's if it's a wanted baby.
It's not a baby. It's a parasite. It's a cancer, And I'm like, what are
not if you want it? Only if you want it. If you don't want it, it becomes something different. And I think I don't think people would say that at 8 or 9 months. I don't think anyone would still call it a clump of cells. They don't know that that's what they're doing in this amendment.
Do they not realize that we're all, I mean, if you really think about it, if we're going to get all existential about it, we're all a clump of cells. I'm a clump of cells. That's literally this is all cells. So what does that mean? So I'm a clump of cells that's just bigger and slightly more organized. I don't it's so fascinating to me how we're able to use rhetoric and language to just shift and manipulate the way people think about things.
Yeah, and it's also something that is increasingly, science is having a bigger impact on our culture. The more science shows us that the baby growing in that womb is a person at a much younger, it used to be there was just you could tell if the baby was moving, and that was about it. There was no way to see inside and see that person in there. And I saw a story a couple weeks ago. The Guinness Book of World Records, the earliest born person who has survived was 22 weeks.
Oh wow!
So that is something that is increasingly science is able to care for that unborn child at a younger and younger time, and as a result, it's and it also shows how radical this amendment is. Article 22 is something that Anne was just noting to me the other day. It is California is doing something crazy in their constitution. Vermont is still the most radical solution to the quote unquote solution to the Roe versus Wade situation, which is not a problem. It's not an issue. All of that is the most radical thing in the entire country.
I think that's right. I think most people think of California as being, well, they're the really radical place. And when it comes to abortion, of course, they protect all abortion. It's California. California does not permit on-demand abortion. In other words, it's not a matter of the mother's health or mother's survival. They do not permit it post-viability. They recognize that when a child can survive outside the womb, they should not be allowing that. They regulate it in California. And Vermont, we don't. And not only do we not, but we want to put it in the Constitution that we can never change course and decide to regulate when it's imminent birth, just a month or two or less away.
And Yeah, and I think this is actually the kind of the heart of the issue of the why. I think people are seeing that shift in culture, that those scientific advancements, the it's now a moral issue because you can see that person, that human, that child growing and moving and wiggling 10 fingers, 10 toes at a much earlier date than just when it is
Yes.
born at 9 months. And so they have been seeing that writing on the wall. And this is my own personal opinion. No, I haven't really discussed it with anyone else. I think they are seeing that writing on the wall, and they want to put this in the Constitution and then close the door behind themselves and throw away the key, because that is what this Article 22 will do in the real world.
It is one of the things I found very funny in all of this are the folks who keep threatening to move to Europe and leave the country because, how terrible we are. And I'm like, do you know that most European countries ban at 15 weeks? And the only, what is it? There's only 2 other countries in the world that allow abortion up to the point that we do, and it's North Korea and China.
Yeah, there's 6 or 7 more.
Oh, there's a handful. Okay.
But all of the developed countries in Europe, the ones that we look to as similar to us, they all have strong restrictions. None of them allow third trimester. Many of them say unrestricted only to 12 weeks. Many of them.
Right. And that's even in France, where they're known for being way more liberal sexually and all this other stuff. So even those folks are saying, hey, there are real consequences to your decisions, and make sure that you're making good decisions. Right.
Well, and that's kind of what I was referencing when I said, there is a tension here. There is a terrible tension between a person's right to their own autonomy and yet this living, independent human life developing. There is a tension. We have struggled. Every place in the world struggles with it. Nobody else says we're throwing out all of one side of that difficult debate. They all struggle with it. How do we balance it? We don't necessarily agree how to balance it, but we struggle to try to come to some sort of level. And this just throws it out. It says we're not paying any attention to at any point that there might be a life there. It's only about reproductive autonomy. It's not about any life developing.
Well, and I think, something that we've interestingly enough talked about the slippery slope multiple times in this conversation, right? So some of this stuff sounds good in theory until you walk it all the way out to the logical conclusion, until you walk it all the way out to where people are going to push it and try. Not a great example, but I remember people back when they were passing same-sex marriage, basically making it so you couldn't ban same-sex marriage. And there were a lot of people who were like, this sounds good and all, but wait until, people want to marry animals or do this. And, how could you say that? How could you compare gay people to that? And it's like, we're not comparing gay people to that. We're saying that there are people who are going to use your same argument for other things that the majority of us agree are not okay. So there are literally people marrying, polyamory and all these other things. And they're arguing for that.
Erica, one of the things people will say is, you know what? There aren't any abortions at 9 months in Vermont. Nobody does that. But you know what?
I literally got argued with this the other day. Okay,
Erica,
go ahead. Sorry.
Google it today, and you will find a website that says, Vermont women, contact us here for your 3rd trimester abortion. They're not located in Vermont right now, but there's a market, and they are trying to tap into that market. And if you don't think that if abortion is closed down or cramped down in those states, they're not going to move to Vermont. I mean, it's not as if this is a fictional thing. Right. But the other point is that one of the leading proponents of this amendment said on the radio just a few weeks ago, the fundamental issue here is about expressing our values and beliefs in the Constitution. That's why it belongs in the Constitution. And so the real question is that a fundamental value of Vermonters to protect abortion through 9 months? I don't care whether that specific thing is happening today or not. The question is it our fundamental value that it should be protected and there should never allowed any governmental regulation at any time in the future at any age?
And I think it's more important. Are we going to allow the dehumanization of a whole class of human beings to stand? I mean, maybe that's not the right way to frame it, but to me, it's, you want me to codify the depersoning, I'm sure that's not a word, the depersoning of a whole class of individuals. And that deeply disturbs me, because if we say that these people are not human beings and therefore they are not deserving of constitutional protections, then what is to stop the state from putting that same label on other people, other races, other circumstances, et cetera, and so forth?
Been there, done that, and I thought we had learned.
Right? Like it's bringing us back to the eugenics stuff, because, you know, I think about the fact that, again, at some point in the past, my husband was not considered a whole person, or he was not considered valuable and didn't deserve protection under the Constitution and state laws. They are, you know, there are folks who say, you know, any babies that might have birth defects, one of my volunteers, a good friend, his sister was told that her son that she was pregnant with was going to have Down syndrome and that she should get an abortion. And she was later on in her term, right? And she didn't. She did not have the abortion. She said, no, I'm going to have this baby no matter what. And he came out fine. And I know 2 people personally who had that story. And you go, okay, so now I guess people with disabilities are not people, and we can just kill them too?
If he didn't come out fine, does that mean he wasn't entitled to life because he was disabled?
So people who might struggle or have problems or, you know, have any kind of a challenge in life, they just shouldn't live?
Well, when you want to start thinking about scary thoughts, think about all of the advances in genetic testing for potential illnesses and disorders. So we can do that now. We can look at tendencies. Do you have a genetic tendency towards a specific disorder? We can do that pre-birth and then decide, well, you know, there's a 50% chance that this baby will have breast cancer in her 20s. Well, I don't want to impose that on her. You know, I mean, it gets really scary when you combine different things like that.
It is really outrageous. Okay, so everybody watching, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Today, we've got on Matthew Strong with Vermonters for Good Government and Representative Ann Donahue from Washington. It's
Northfield, actually.
Northfield. It's the Washington District.
Right. Washington
01. Yeah. Northfield. Okay. That's why I was like, I know I just said this totally wrong. Okay. So we've got Representative Ann Donahue, Matthew Strong. Now you guys have an event coming up. If I recall correctly, you got a kickoff event coming up for your efforts to stop Prop 5. Is that right?
That is correct. On Saturday, this coming Saturday, July 23rd, from 10 a.m. until noon at the State House in Montpelier. And it's an opportunity for Ann's going to be speaking. Our other spokeswoman, Anissa Lamberton, will be speaking. I'll be sharing some thoughts and strategies for how folks out in their local communities can have an impact. And it's going to be, we're going to have literature for folks to come and get, you know, bumper stickers, column cards, yard signs, the whole 9 yards.
Excellent.
And the important thing for folks to understand is, and I want to let people know, for a long time it has felt like Vermont hasn't had. It's like, oh, we're gonna go through this motion. It's a fight that needs to be fought, but it's ultimately it's a foregone conclusion. And while this is a David and Goliath situation, as we have shared in just an hour, Article 22 is horrible on literally any metric that you look at.
Yeah.
From any viewpoint.
Both sides. Yep.
And so our polling has shown that when people in Vermont understand what the real world ramifications are, the support drops well below 50%. So this is a winnable fight if we can let people know what those real world ramifications are. And that's what our campaign kickoff is all about.
Okay.
And
so
the real world reality of needing to raise the funds to get the message out, just so people have a right to know what they're voting on, to get accurate information, not some of the false information that's out there.
Absolutely. Okay. We've got one question before we get to that. I just want to share a little bit on your social media. So, hold on. So, Matthew, what you just said there is really important. And I want to repeat it to make sure people understood. When Vermonters understand what this is, the support drops well below 50%. So that means we just have to educate our neighbors. We have to educate our friends and our family and let them know what this is really about. So you've got Vermonters for Good Government. You've got the Facebook page right here. I've got it liked, so I get notifications of when you guys have things going on. They can find out more about the campaign kickoff. I know we're going to be there this Saturday for sure, in support of you guys. You've got the Twitters. Mm-hmm. So you've got. I haven't followed you guys. Am I logged in? Can I follow? I gotta log in. I'll do that after. I know I'm not. I just barely started a Twitter account. I was told I had to for the campaign, so I'm still not all caught up on that, but I'm working on it. So people can follow you on Twitter. It looks like you're doing a great job of sharing bits of information, things to consider, shareable information, stuff you can send to your, easily tweet to your friends and family, retweet. Send a Facebook message or, share the stuff through Facebook Messenger or whatever. So you've got the Instagram. I like it.
And there's Anne's lovely face. We're so excited to announce her coming on board and being a spokesperson. She's going to be doing presentations around the not the country, although she kind of is. She was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Okay, so let me see. What was I just going to ask you guys? Here's your website. There is a lot of great information on here, y'all. If you want to go check out the website, poke around, see what their options there are. You can subscribe to the newsletter so you can hear about it, donate, help out, sign the pledge. Look at that. 80% of Americans oppose terminating the baby the day before it's born. And that's
and that's now gone up. So
90%, the newest Harris poll. Yeah.
Yep. So if you go back to the Facebook page there and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see an all green with that information. There it is. That next one right there.
Oh, yep. The Harris poll. Yep.
So,
you know what? I'm going to put this in the chat.
There we go.
This link. Okay.
And this is something that people need to understand, is that this is, as Anne has said, this is not about Roe v. Wade. This is far and above. 90% of Americans do not want unregulated up to 9 months abortion. And what the folks in the legislature have done is asked us to do it at a constitutional amendment level, without the possibility of changing it later. So it's technically possible, but the reality is mostly impossible. So it is something that 90% of Americans do not want. So,
and that's, What other topic do 90% of Americans agree on?
Yeah.
I mean, real
Yeah.
talk. Literally, when was the last poll you heard that pretty much everybody agreed on?
Right.
I don't think I've ever heard anything that close. Chocolate. I only know one person who doesn't like chocolate. I mean, that might be the only other thing we might all agree on.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question. I'm going to totally mess this up. Rev'd Peter Naples. Naples, ma'am or sir Naples. What do you think would be a decent way to speak to reproductive liberties in legal constitutional principles so that family rights and the importance of parents' rights and parenting is also affirmed? Interesting. So let me read that again. What do you think would be a decent way to speak to reproductive liberties in legal constitutional principles so that family rights and the importance of parents' rights and parenting is also affirmed? Oh, actually, here, I can show it. Boom. Can you guys see that on your end?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
No, it's an excellent question. And really the answer would be, it takes a lot of work. You would have to really spend time with experts and lawyers and craft the right language to try to balance critical rights, which is exactly what this fails to do, is any kind of balancing of other critical rights. So could it be done? It'd be very challenging, but it would take work that wasn't done. This was a very broad swath. Let the courts define it approach.
Yeah. Yep. Did you have something, Matthew?
Which is what Representative Ann Donahue is and continues to be against. The abdication of legislative authority to the court system is incorrect, unconstitutional, and not what the legislature is supposed to do. It is a really bad situation that I am hopeful Vermonters will also help hold legislators accountable for that.
Yes.
We send our representatives to Montpelier, to the State House, to have those difficult conversations, to work out compromises that have our best interests in mind. So for them to write a single sentence that literally opens Pandora's box and then throws it out for the court system to decide is the very definition of the abdication of legislative authority.
I wonder, how is it even legal? I feel like it seems like there's no way this doesn't get challenged in court. I feel like there's no way this doesn't something is going to happen and somebody is going to sue.
Well, the process,
I imagine
the process was followed, and it's a vote of the people. The real issue becomes, is there the ability to educate people about what it does or doesn't mean? So I think that's what it comes down to, and people wanting to be educated and not to jump. I think there is a real knee-jerk response that says, I agree. I want to protect Roe v. Wade. And no recognition that this has nothing to do with that, that it won't protect anybody from something that Washington wants to do on a radical basis in any direction. And that in terms of Vermont and what we can do, our laws already say there's no restriction on abortion. Putting it in the Constitution will not protect anyone against what Washington might do. Washington preempts everything.
Yep. So even Becca Ballant should want to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. Excuse me.
Yep.
Excuse me for getting a little dig in there.
Yep.
That is what it is, just so. It always makes me laugh. Matthew, you know this about me. I'm very libertarian minded, very libertarian leaning. I'm always going to take a step back and I'm going to go, okay, how does this affect the Constitution? What does the Constitution say about this? How does this affect people's ability to, go through life, knowing that they have, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And so it always just flabbergasts me when there are people who think that there's a problem with the government, the way that the government does something, and then their solution is to give that same government more power.
Right.
It is antithetic. Like, what makes you, like, you're not going to be in charge forever, right?
Mhm.
You don't like the people in charge now, which is why you're trying to change something and then give more power to yourself. But if you get more power for yourself, well, then when the guy you don't like gets in office, then they're going to have that same power.
Well, that's right. And the Supreme Court, as people are pointing to in Washington, the Supreme Court doesn't stay the same either. So I think people are thinking, well, our Supreme Court will protect these rights. So let's go the most protective route by throwing this all in some broad terms in the Constitution. Well, sorry, folks, our Supreme Court changes too. That's no kind of ultimate protection for what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And also that brings up another fantastic point: the idea of the relative permanency of what they're trying to do. What happens 10 years from now, 100 years from now, or even next year? There's after the midterms, what is the federal government going to look like? Are they going to pass a personhood status bill, twisting Biden's arm somehow to get him to sign something? Then now the legislature has no authority to make any changes after anything happens at the federal level.
Right.
Well, and in that case, we live in a freaking, we got a king now who can just write executive orders, and now all of a sudden everybody's going to do it. We just not just over, bypass the legislature, but bypass the courts and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's something that I don't think many legislators, other than a handful, including Ann Donahue, one of the few folks in the legislature who actually reads bills before voting on them. And it is something that people need to understand. This, what you're talking, what they have done is they want this to pass, and it will tie their hands in the future. They won't be able to make changes in the future to react to changes in culture, our science, our moral code as a society, and the federal government. Those court decisions, they won't be able to do anything.
It's incredibly short-sighted.
Oh my gosh, it really is. It's
by the very people who want to have it achieved. It's very short-sighted.
It really is,
and
I
takes
think
power away from the people. People won't be able to change it once it's voted in. Once people
and I think
are misled into voting for it, they won't be able to change it.
And this is, I think, the most important thing. And I'm going to let you guys have the last word here in just a minute. Do you have any information? Oh, sorry. Somebody just asked, I'm trying to get info on Vermonters for Good Government event this Saturday at the state building. Do you have any information? Yes. So it's on their Facebook page. I'm going to go back and I'm going to share the link in the chat for the event.
Saturday, 10 to noon.
Saturday, 10 to noon at the State House, right?
Yep. And we'll have yard signs and information and a couple of speakers. Palm cards,
maple creamies.
Yes, maple creamies. It's kind of a big deal. I wanted to go with free beer, but I was advised against that. Hey, up at the State House.
Why not do both? Beer and ice cream. I think that sounds fabulous.
Yeah, there's nothing more quintessentially Vermont than maple creamies, other than literally just giving people a cup full of syrup. That would be another thing.
You need a maple IPA and then the maple creamy. I think that would make everybody happy. Everybody's going to find something that they like, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're welcome, Mary. Absolutely. Okay. So I'll give you both. The last word. I want to make sure. Is there anything else that we haven't covered in our conversation tonight that you want to make sure Vermonters know? Obviously, go vote in November. And if you're not a voter, why? I meet people all the time who are not voters, and then they're not happy with the way things are. And I'm like, do you not translate that your vote or not voting is the reason why you don't like the way that things are. Anyway, I'm digressing. So what have we not covered tonight that the two of you think we need to make sure Vermonters hear today?
There's a lot. So
But I think you have covered the most critical things. And I think those most critical things, a fundamental question, do our beliefs and values as Vermonters, do they support an unlimited right to a third trimester elective abortion right up to the time of birth and locking that right into our Constitution? Do we support that? And secondly, do we support, or is that part of our rights and beliefs, turning over to Vermont's courts the unlimited discretion to define and sort out what in the world we mean by a person's reproductive autonomy left completely undefined and wide open?
How many members of the Supreme Court are there in Vermont?
5.
5 people. So do 640,000 Vermonters want to let 5 people decide what reproductive autonomy means, since our legislature refused to do it themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. That is a really good question, Anne. Okay, so Matthew, you said a lot. Pick like one thing, the most important thing that we haven't covered yet today.
I would say the most important thing is to actually have Vermonters commit to telling 10 friends and family about Article 22.
Okay,
good.
That's
all right.
That's all I'm asking people to do. This is how we stop this, by having a conversation. And what you're going to hear, and this is something that a lot of people don't know because they don't know, the majority of the responses you will hear when you say, hey, have you heard about Article 22? It's going to be on the ballot in November. You're going to hear, no, I had no idea that was going to be on the ballot. What is it? 70% of Vermonters, after the final legislative vote before the Dobbs leak that happened, 61% of Vermonters had not heard of Article 22 or Prop 5. Another 9% weren't sure if they have heard about it, which is code for I haven't heard about it, but I don't want to sound like I haven't heard about it. So that's 70% of Vermonters didn't know anything about this that has passed 4 votes in the House and Senate, made
70?
national headlines. People don't know about it.
You said 70? 70?
70.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. So it's okay to have those conversations. Tell 10 people.
Yes.
Friends, family, have them go check out our website or Facebook page if they want some more info. But just tell people, hey, this is on the ballot in November. Please go check it out.
And I think that's great. And I like the way you framed it too. You know, people can be really afraid to have some of these hard conversations with their friends and family because of how contentious everything is. And I think with a little bit of practice and a little bit of coaching, with, you know, some great talking points that you can share with people, you know, you can have these conversations without it having to be contentious. And again, 90% apparently now of Americans agree that, you know, abortion up to the point of birth is not okay. So this really isn't a pro-life, pro-choice argument anymore. This is about reason, rationality, science, logic. And I mean, I could say a lot of other things because, again, as we've covered, when you're dehumanizing people, oh, good Lord. Anyway, so keep it simple, keep it straightforward. You don't even have to get into a whole conversation about when life begins or any of that other stuff. Most people already agree that this is nonsense. So just share. Did you know Vermont is trying to enshrine this in the law? Are you cool with that? No, don't let the vague language fool you in November when you go to vote, because that, I think, is the most important thing. And that you said people will be deceived, because if I'm 70% of Vermonters and I don't know what Prop 5 is, and I just walk into the booth in November to vote, and all I see is, do you want reproductive autonomy? Well, of course I want. Who doesn't?
Good. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds reasonable.
And that's what they're counting on. That is what they're counting on. And as well as so Prop 5, the words Prop 5 will not appear on the ballot at all. Only Article 22, those 2 words.
Oh, so we should really be calling it Article 22.
Yes. So
Okay.
so we're starting that transition of, we start, a commentary with both, and then transition to anything after that is, it's Article 22. It's Article 22.
Got it.
Yep.
All right, good. I like it. Okay, that is an awesome place to end. Anybody, if you have any questions, reach out. There is a contact us. Let me see. Right? There's
Yep.
a contact us on your website, right?
Yeah, the About Us has our
About
contact
Us
information.
page. Okay, the About Us page has a place to contact. Do you guys want to share any other contact? Oh, yeah, it's all right here. Email, phone number. You can call anybody. Let's see. For those listening, 802-828-7095. For our Vermonters who aren't into the internet, I have a tendency to just tell people, go to the website. And then I meet all these people and they're like, I don't want to go to a website. I want to talk to a person. So 802-828-7095. Give them a call. Be curious. Ask questions. Don't take for granted that your elected officials are telling you the truth, because just like all other human beings, they're selfish and self-centered and self-interested. And so keep them accountable, hold them accountable, make sure that they are standing up for your values, Vermont, because we deserve better than what we're getting from our current well, except for Anne. Anne's great. There's a few other really great ones in the state house, but we don't want to let's be real, we don't want to let Chittenden County decide for the rest of the state what our values are. We need to stand up. We need to stand up for our values and say no more of this nonsense. So thank you both so much for coming on tonight. Mary says, thank you all for your service. No, I do not want that nonsense to happen in the state house. This is great, you guys. We're really getting people talking about this. I so appreciate your efforts and the work that you're doing to help protect Vermonters. It is so important. It's so valued. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks again.
Yes. All right. We're going to head out here. Y'all have a good night. Come back and see us next week. Wait, who's on the calendar next week? Is next week Tucker Perkins? Next week, we've got Tucker Perkins coming on. He is going to be talking to us about the value of propane. They're just bringing renewable propane to Vermont. That is a new, I know, I didn't even know that was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Renewable propane. I was like,
cool.
That doesn't make any sense to me, but it's a thing. We're constantly, as human beings, innovating, inventing, figuring out ways around problems that we have, right? Just like babies somehow can be born now at 22 weeks and survive. If that is not the miracle of modern medicine, I do not know what is. And we can do the same. We can apply the same resources, logic, and brain power to our energy needs and to any kind of climate change, global warming stuff that's going on. We have the ability to adapt and make good decisions. And I know and I trust that Vermonters will make good decisions this November and vote against Article 22. So thank you again, Matthew Strong with Vermonters for Good Government, Representative Ann Donahue from Northfield. Thank you again both so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.